to it. Columbus and other cannibals. The weedy cold disease of exploitation, imperialism, and terrorism. Revised edition. Jack D. Forbes. Jack D. Forbes has actually done a lot of work when it comes to the history of the Americas. As a matter of fact, let's check out his Wikipedia real fast. Let's check out his Wikipedia real quick so you can just see who he is. Because it's important if we're gonna be reading about him. We gotta know who this guy is, right? So Jack D. Forbes, Jack Douglas Forbes, born January 7th, 1934, out of the LBC. Paris, February 23rd, 2011, at the age of 77. Okay, Jack D. Forbes was an American historian, writer, scholar, and political activist who specialized in Native American issues. He is best known for his role in establishing one of the first Native American studies programs at University of California, Davis. In addition, he was one of the co-founders of DQ University, a prominently Native American college in Davis, California. Hit the like button for me, y'all. Hit the share button if you can. Okay, so clearly he knew what he was talking about, right? Let's look at some of his awards and honors. Before Columbus Foundation, American Book for Lifetime Achievement, 1997. Wordcraft Circle, Writer of the Year, Prose Non-Fiction Award, 1999. 2009, Lifetime Achievement Award, Native Writers Circle of the Americas. Okay. These are just some of his honors, right? Cool. Let's look at the table of contents. So, 1, the genesis of the universe and the creation of love. That sounds very powerful. That sounds deep, don't it? Consuming another's life, the Wedico cannibal psychosis. Columbus, cannibal and hero of genocide. Deception, brutality, and greed, the spread of the disease. The structure of the cannibals' insanity, arrogance, lust, and materialism. Becoming a predator, the process of corruption. The Machi syndrome, fascination with evil. Colonialism, Europeanization, and the destruction of native, authentic cultures. 9, savages, free people, and the loss of freedom. Terrorism, a frequent aspect of Wedico behavior. Male violence, female subordination, and the perpetuation of aggressive violence. I had to click that to actually see what that said. Chapter 12, organized crime, planned aggression, planned predation. 13, if Jesus were to return. 14, seeking sanity, reversing the process of brutalization. 15, finding a good path, a path with heart. Well, since it's quote unquote Thanksgiving, we're going right to Columbus. We're going to go right to chapter 3. Okay. Let's see what's in this book. Chapter 3, Columbus, Cannibal, and Hero of Genocide. It is interesting and instructive that many Anglo-Saxons of North America and Latinos of Latin America seem to be in agreement about Cristobal Colon, or Christopher Columbus. The admiral of the ocean sea was the discoverer of America, and he is to be celebrated as a hero, they seem to say. The Anglos of North America and the white Latinos of the rest of the hemisphere have some other things in common. Of course, foremost of which is their continuous exploitation of and aggression against the American race, the so-called Indians, and their identification with Europe, from whence their ancestors or some of them came. The story of the English speakers' conquest of North America will be well known to most readers. The American nations were, of course, their enemies for more than 3 centuries. A certain number of Anglo-North Americans have absorbed Native American and / or African ancestry, but the overwhelming majority continue to view themselves as white and as of European origin. They do not generally think of themselves as having a common heritage with their old enemies, the native people. The Latinos of Spanish-speaking America may include Americo-Latinos of native ancestry or Afro-Latinos of African descent. But the most powerful group are those who pride themselves on their quote-unquote white appearance and their Spanish or other European ancestries. These Blancos actually may have some Native American or African ancestry, but they are often ashamed of it, and in any case, are usually extremely prejudiced against modern people of American, African, or darker mixed appearance. They could perhaps better be referred to as Jatupines or Spaniards or Hispanics, right? And we know this to be true. I mean, we can see this in our daily lives. You know what I mean? We kind of see the separations between different classes or different quote unquote ethnicities of folks. And a lot of times it's going off of skin complexion, right? Because nobody's really digging down to the history. Nobody's really digging down to dissect the truth. In order to do that, you have to go back to the beginning. You have to go back to history, right? So once again, let's see who this man is once again, because I don't want you thinking this is truth be told. I don't want you thinking this is just my interpretation. Like, I'm not a historian. What the feezy? Hold on, y'all. Let's see his resume once again. Was Jack Forrest Native American? Jack D. Forrest was born January 7, 1934, to parents of mixed Powhatan, Lenape, Delaware, Lenape, Swiss, and Celtic descent. Okay. So he has no reason to lie. These are the things he's finding in his studies, right? Many Latinos exalt the heritage of Europe and despise the native people. In practice, if not in theory, they also ordinarily dominate the various systems of exploitation which feed upon the bodies of Native American and colored peoples from Argentina northwards through much of Middle America. They design and operate the Spanish language television programs and films which exalt blindness and light skin and which foster a colonial settler style of consumeristic materialism. Oh, this book may be way too deep. This book may be way too deep for the average person to respect it, right? But I mean, isn't that the truth? We know that's the truth. We don't have to, on this channel, we share no qualms or anything. We are all here together, whatever shade you are, to get this wisdom. This is how we're gonna get free. We have to have this wisdom and understand that the way that we think is actually kind of normal. There's lots of people that agree with what you think. Some are just afraid to say it. What's up, Erica? Right. So what he's saying here is he's not saying all. Okay. He's just saying a vast majority of the Latinos now in the Americas, they exalt their ancestry from Europe. I remember watching a video a while back, right? It was actually the president of Mexico, and he was in the video, in the clip, he was explaining, he was like, I will never forget, my ancestry in Africa. Right? He was saying like that's very important to me because it's starting to get wiped away. Right? It's starting to get wiped away. Okay. Paragraph 2. As inheritors of the Spanish invaders, the white Latinos usually own everything worth owning or are constantly seeking to become the owners. The military dictatorships belong to them, although they share power with a certain number of mestizos or Latinos, mixed bloods, or Europeanized Indians who collaborate with them, right? So we all know who the Europeanized, we already know we know who the Europeanized Indians are, right? All right, Erica. The ones they always put in front of our faces, right? They always put them in front of our faces for a reason. Okay. Same thing, like even when we watch videos or little clips of Mexico, right? We always have the higher hued people on the television programs, right? But we gotta understand there's a lot of Afro Latinos there with like straight afros, locks. Excuse me, with locks, braids, and everything going to the back. You know what I mean? But it's in this society, it's covered up, right? Those who do not despise the native race, even as there are a number who struggle for justice, right? So it's not everybody. He's just saying there is an agenda though with certain individuals. Nonetheless, the main thrust of these groups is still decidedly anti-American, since they continue to exhibit prejudice against Native American physical characteristics and the original cultures of the Americas. What? So what does that mean? Because we see them. Who are they talking about? Who are they talking about? Because we see the Indians all the time. The Latinos are with them all the time. But he's telling you here that's not who that is. Those are Europeanized Indians, right? Who got changed through colonization. They continue to join forces to destroy the true people. Just like the scriptures say, everybody's eating off of true ears, right? We should not be surprised that Columbus Day is celebrated by people of European descent throughout much of the Americas. What does it mean to celebrate such a day? What does it tell us about the values of people who regard booty hole, excuse me, Christopher Columbus as a hero, or who describe his anniversary as the day of the race? Of whose race are they speaking? Right? Nobody with the spirit of the Most High should be even touching this day. One of the most wicked days ever. Think about how deep this is. Right now, in America, especially in Western America, the majority of America is celebrating Thanksgiving, right? But they're so outraged about Ish in the 12 to 1400. They're also so outraged about the Palestinians. Isn't that amazing? Isn't that amazing how you could be so outraged about this I'm so outraged about this situation, but I'm still going to celebrate the individual that perpetrated the first, well, not the first, but the perpetrated one of the most destructive cleansings the earth has ever seen with a turkey. The hypocrisy, is ridiculous. I will argue that we can compare the commemoration of Columbus with the doings of neo-Nazi organizations in Europe and the Americas, groups which commemorate the great dates of Hitler's regime. He just compared this to neo-Nazism. Celebrating this day is like celebrating a neo-Nazi organization. That's what he's saying. This is according to Jack Forbes, Jack D. Forbes, the Native American historian, which means he studied a lot for decades. Things we have never seen or heard, right? The difference is that the neo-Nazis are a minority and their commemorations usually do not receive much attention. That's true. Like, that stuff was minuscule. But every holiday over here, the followers of Columbus, on the other hand, occupied the seats of power throughout much of the Americas. He called them the followers of Columbus. That's deep once you think about it. Their holidays are national ones, often imposed on their respective societies. Woo, we just said that, didn't we? This is a powerful book right here. Columbus did not, of course, discover America. All white people have known from the beginning of contact that the Native Americans were already present and had obviously discovered the land. Moreover, Columbus's own accounts, okay? You can go look this letter up yourself. I would go get it, but my life might freeze. But Columbus's own accounts, as recorded by Bartolome de las Casas, revealed that he had heard rumors of being preceded in the Caribbean by black colored people. What? What? Because where they at now? Still further, the Icelandic sagas showed that Norse and Celtic settlers had reached Greenland. Labrador, and Newfoundland some 500 years before Columbus's voyage, and that American captives had been taken to Norway in about 1009. Later, Inuit captives were taken to Norway in ca. 1420, and their watercrafts were on display in a Norwegian cathedral for many years. Okay. Let me know if y'all have any questions. I'm just going to go through this whole chapter. But let me know if y'all have any questions, anything you want me to look up. We on it. Hit the chat. As if this were not enough, any informed writer could have read in Pliny's Natural History, a work long used in Latin instruction, that in the last century BC, some quote-unquote Indian merchants were blown by a storm to the coast of Germany, probably Netherlands. Writers who were living in the 16th century cited this account when they discussed the background for the voyages of Columbus, since these Indians must have come from the Atlantic Ocean. Thus, it has been long known that Native Americans reached Europe prior to Columbus. In addition to the knowledge that the Norse also preceded him to the Americas and that other whites and even blacks may have reached the Caribbean before 1492. On top of this, there is evidence that Bretons, Basques, or other Europeans reached Newfoundland in the 15th century. Evidence which has been known ever since early maps of 1436 and 1448 showed Stockfish Island, Codfish or Bacalhau Island west of Iceland. Right? Thus, the so-called discovery of Columbus is a preposterous myth and has long been known as such. It is true, of course, that Columbus's voyage was an important undertaking, much the same as Marco Polo's land journey to China of an earlier century. But no one pretends that Marco Polo discovered China. Why? Perhaps because there are no European colonial settlers in China who need to evoke Marco Polo as a symbol for a successful but still contested conquest. Right? Columbus Day and the hero worship of Columbus stand then as symbols dear to many of the European invaders of the Americas. But what do these symbols represent? To understand the answers to this question, let us briefly review the goals and behavior of Columbus in the Indies. It's about to get real. Colon had experience along the coast of West Africa, helping to carry Africans to Portugal. What does that mean? Slave trade, right? What's that mean? The transatlantic slave trade, right? He was apparently very similar with the slave trade. Oh, there you go. With the slave trade. And with the philosophy of imperialism. As we shall see, he implemented a process of genocide, probably without parallel, until the days of Adolf. Moreover, it was his intention to commit ethnocide and to ruthlessly exploit the people he found in America. See, one thing our wise brother on another channel, Big Judah, spoke about and has been speaking, or not even just him, lots of people. In the book of Revelation, when the fourth part of the earth was being decimated and the White Rider was conquering, Columbus wrote in his own writings as well that he knew that was his mission. He was fulfilling prophecy by conquering these lands. He knew it. You know it. That stuff happened back then. People just don't want to acknowledge what truly happened. Right? So it's nothing to them. That's why they're out here celebrating Columbus Day. On his first voyage, Columbus forcibly kidnapped at least 27 Americans, 2 of whom escaped. His philosophy of ethnocide and imperialism is expressed when, after kidnapping 7 men, he wrote, this is his writings right here, "When your highness so command, they can all be carried off to Castile or held captive in the island itself, since with 50 men they would be all kept in subjection and forced to do whatever may be wished." Sound like slavery. Columbus did not therefore require any economic disappointments or armed resistance to develop an argument for the total depopulation of an island, or, alternatively, the total subjection of the inhabitants. Columbus summed up his assessment of the Americans and their quote-unquote rights as human beings by stating, "And they are fitted to be ruled and to be set to work, to cultivate the land and to do all else that may be necessary. And you may build towns and teach them to go clothed and to adopt our customs. Also, they would make good and industrious servants." Who does that sound like? Who does it sound like? These Native Americans, who were not eaters of human flesh and who were, as Columbus reported, peaceful and inoffensive, right? We know how they're savages, and none of that has ever been proven. There's not one account that proves that the Aboriginals were savages, but quite the contrary, right? I know why this live only got 2 views. I know why this one's suppressed. Don't worry about it. These Native Americans who were not eaters of human flesh and who were, as Columbus reported, peaceful and inoffensive solely for the crime of being alive and unconquered, were to be forced to work for the Spaniards and to have their way of life radically changed. Perhaps with the above quote, one can see why Columbus remains even today such a hero figure to so many exploiters. His words sum up the philosophy of most imperial systems and of the avaricious social classes from North America to Argentina, who find it so desirable that brown skinned men and women should have to work for them as maids, cheap laborers, and sweatshop factory workers. Why does he keep comparing the natives of this land to brown and black people, though? This historian. Why does he keep doing that? I don't get it. After learning of the reported existence of the so-called Carib people who allegedly ate human flesh, Columbus developed plans for their large-scale enslavement. Okay, the Caribs, after correction, would be better than any other slaves whatsoever. On January 30th, 1494, Columbus proposed to the Spanish crown that the enslavement of Americans would pay for the cost of the conquest. Do y'all remember that? Dumb diverses. Dumb diverses. Let's look at it. And that was actually 1450. Yeah, that was actually a little bit earlier. Or it might have been, yeah. So let's look at it. The last sentence right here. Along with the sanctifying the seizure of 9 Christian lands and encouraged the enslavement of native non-Christian peoples in Africa and the New World. In Africa and the New World. And then Inter-Catera came in 1493. Okay? Then Inter-Catera came in 1493. So on January 30th, 1494, Columbus proposed to the Spanish crown that the enslavement of Americans would pay for the cost of the conquest. Columbus and his compatriots first began to enslave Taino or Arawak people who were neither cannibalistic nor warlike. Lacasas noted he will finish in a very short time consuming all the people of this island, Haiti, because he was determined to load the ships which would go to Castile with slaves and to send them to sail to the Canary and Azores and Cabo Verde Islands and wherever he wanted, so that they might be sold well. And upon this merchandise was derived the supplies for meeting the cost and to excuse the crown from any cost, as with a major granary. Okay? Haiti. Thus Columbus planned to act out his role as a cannibal in a very literal sense, filling every vessel with slaves. That's what this book is talking about, the consumption, not only of the flesh, but of an entire psychology and culture, an ethnocide. Right? The Americans were simply raw material, grain, constituting a grangeria or a granary for Spanish composition. Continuous wars were precipitated, which provided the excuse for Geno. Columbus wrote to the Spanish monarchs that from Haiti, it is possible, in the name of the Holy Trinity, in the name of Jesus, to send all the slaves, which it is possible to sell, of which, if the information which I have is correct, they tell me that one can sell 4,000. Here, there are so many of these slaves in Brazil wood that it seems a living thing, but still gold. Even as he was loading 5 ships with slaves, Columbus was proposing to sell 4,000 in various parts of Europe and Africa. You see, the transatlantic slave trade was a revolving door. Yeah, people was coming from Africa, getting sold west or from the West Banks of Africa getting sold, and people was getting sold to Africa from the Americas. Yeah. Noting that slaves and brothers were here still good. Columbus knew full well that enslaved Americans would die in great numbers. But he was not worried, since the Africans and native Canary Islanders, when first enslaved, had also died in similar numbers. Okay. In short, the huge death rates were justified by ultimate profits. For Colon, the Americans were simply pieces or goat heads, cabeza de cabras. It did not matter if only 10% finally reached the slave markets, according to La Casas. So we got to think about that. Being packed up like sardines in a boat, majority of you are going to die from hunger because it's not going to feed you. Sickness and disease. Where are you using the bathroom at? Apparently, you stand there in the bottom of boats, right? So it wasn't that many people making it. The wars waged by the Spaniards against the peaceful Americans of Haiti. Have you ever wondered why there's so much contention with Haiti just even now? I'm going to leave that alone, though. Were brutal in the extreme, resulting in huge losses of life. The entire operation was carried out in the style of AH, with a one-time wastage of life similar to that of shipping Jays and others to concentration camps and slave labor facilities in World War II. Makes me wonder why the 15 major cities of WW2 were called ghettos. Interesting. Miguel Cuneo, who accompanied Columbus on the second expedition to the Americas, reports that when our caravels were to leave for Spain, we gathered 1,600 male and female persons of those Indians, and of those we embarked in our caravels on February 17th, 1495, 550 souls, among the healthiest. For those who remained, we let it be known in the vicinity that anyone who wanted to take some of them could do so, to the amount desired, which was done. And when each man was thus provided with slaves, there still remained about 400 to whom permission was granted to go where they wished. Among them were many women with children still at sup, so babies, right? Since they were afraid that we might return to capture them once again, they left their children and began to flee like desperate creatures. Happy Thanksgiving, though, right? Where that turkey at? Why were the Americans so desperate to flee that they abandoned their children? Cuneo provides us with a clue from his own behavior. He relates proudly, it seems, that Columbus gave him a very beautiful Carib woman as a slave when Cuneo attempted to rape R.A.P.E. The woman valiantly resisted with all her strength, but Cuneo, in his own words, thrashed her mercilessly and awed her. So much for sentimentality. No wonder that the successors of Columbus in the Americas, the mercenaries of the CIA, and the fiends of the various military dictatorships, RAPE, and abused women almost as an act of normal routine. Man, ain't it a lot of that going on right now? Isn't there so many allegations of this going on? And it's always the men of power, right? It's always the capitalists, the followers of Columbus, who have all these issues, just doing things to women. Interesting. And especially, it seems, brown women of the American race. In any case, we can document that Columbus and his fellow gangsters shipped at least 3,000 Americans as slaves to Europe and Africa through 1401. But since many ships departed from the Indies without leaving us a record of their cargoes, we can assume that the actual total was probably twice that number. And we must keep in mind that tens of thousands had to perish in order to produce these slaves for European consumption. Columbus stands as a clear example of an insane person, a Killer, and a cannibal, a user and abuser of his fellow human beings. But of course, Columbus was not unique, nor was he alone. The Catholic monarchs of Spain, Ferdinand and Isabella, especially Ferdinand, allowed and even encouraged the enslavement and conquest of innocent Americans. Even as earlier Spanish and Portuguese monarchs had brutally enslaved and conquered the native Canary Islanders. Expeditions sent to South American waters in 1499 and 1500 were specifically authorized by the Spanish monarchs to enslave black or brown people found there. After 1500, hundreds of thousands of Americans were enslaved, and millions more were otherwise deprived of freedom, not only by the Spanish and Portuguese, but also by the Dutch, English, and French imperialists. I'm not even going to play with his name, but TT in his study of Columbus concludes the 16th century perpetrated the greatest genocide in human history. In 1500, the world population is approximately 400 million, of whom 80 million inhabit the Americas. By the middle of the 16th century, out of those 80 million, there remain 10. So you know how we always trip off of the 6, or was it 3 million? I don't know, 3 or 6 million that happened to, I don't know, whatever happened in WW2. Well, imagine that times 10. And it was real. And I imagine it continues to happen all the way into today on multiple levels. But this massive cannibalistic orgy was not without its positive consequences. It paved the way for the white conquest of the Americas, provided Europeans with cheap labor, helped to finance the economic development of modern Europe, and set the stage for 5 centuries, 500 years, 4 to 500 years of rule by white and near white elites in the Americas. Perhaps it will be clearer to the reader why so many non-Indians honor the memory of Columbus. And, as we shall see, far too many honor Columbus with deeds, as well as with words. The oppression of the original Americans and of other non-white people is still a daily reality in the land which some believe should be called Columbia rather than America. Perhaps one day, when this age of exploitation is ended, we shall all select a new name for what I sometimes call the middle continent of the earth, after the native name Samanahuac, the land between the rings. Maiza, land of maize, might also be a suitable name. Very interesting, very, very powerful book. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you got a lot of good information off of that. I'm going to clip this up so we can throw it on the YouTube. But we're going to read this whole, I might try to go through this whole book in a few days. Y'all tell me what y'all think. You feel me? But very powerful, a lot of information into that. I mean, it's really irrefutable if you just do a little research. And that's what I think we're going to start calling people. Followers of Columbus. You're a Babylonian. You are a follower of Columbus. Basically. This is the other book I wanted to tap into. I don't know who's all in here, but also by Jack D. Forbes. Africans and Native Americans. The Language of Race and the Evolution of Red Black Peoples. Okay, let's look at some of this contents. Africans and Americans enter continental contacts across the Atlantic. the intensification of contacts, Negro, Black and Moor, Loros, Pardos, and Mestizos, the mulatto concept, part Africans and part Americans as mulattoes, right? And we kind of went over some of this stuff earlier. Right, we kind of went over some of this stuff earlier. But we got some information. Yeah, we got some info. So we're going to get on it, man. We're going to get to it. Let me go ahead and upload this clip real quick to see what goes on with it. And, man, I need to stay tuned, man. I might just start. I don't know what I'm going to do tonight. I feel kind of sleepy, but I know I need to put some work in on these channels. So we'll see what happens. I'm trying to figure out a way to open my channel up. I don't know why whenever I go live, I don't get numbers. So I know they're on my channel. You know what I'm saying? So we'll figure it out. Until next time, though, just keep your eyes peeled. I don't know what y'all got going on tomorrow, but hey, we'll see. Keep your eyes peeled. Keep the notification bell on. If you miss a live, I'm clipping it up. Don't worry about it. Shalom.